My name is Agnes Ruaro, who is the Regional Academic Director of the New Managers Program. We run the New Managers Program across the region in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda. And that is particularly the reason why we thought we should have this conversation with you, because we know that the challenges of transitioning from individual contribution to managerial level is hard enough. It's a task in itself. And having to balance between your managerial responsibilities and leadership responsibilities is another task. And now we have COVID-19, which increases the demands on you as a manager. So our hope is that we'll be able to tackle this session in a way that can help us to walk away with some tangible action points. I'm supported by Clive from Strathmore Business School, who's the manager for this particular program, and Caroline Munene, who supports the marketing perspectives. And in the house, we have three powerful panelists, and I'll come to them in about a minute. And so I just want to share the housekeeping, the norms to help us all enjoy a smooth session. We hope that you can stay muted. Our co-hosts will ensure that that does happen, but in the event that you find yourself unmuted and you're interrupting the rest of the audience, please, if we could try and stay muted. Then in terms of the session, we shall be recording this particular webinar and you will get the full recording. So no worry about how you're going to access the material. We shall do that for you. We would like to encourage you to utilize the chat function in this webinar. If you need to communicate, ask a question to the panel, please type your question at the Q&A so that the audience can see it. And I will be monitoring the chat and I'll be taking the questions and presenting them to the panel for them to tackle them. So I think we are ready to begin. I want to appreciate each and every one of you, our talent partners who are dialing in from across the region, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and the rest of the world. You're welcome. And so I begin by introducing our panelists. We have Mumbi Kahindo, who is the head of leadership and learning. She's waving. I know you're probably off, but you can wave back with the reaction button. She is in charge of leadership and learning at ABSA Regional Operations. And of course, having risen all the way to her role, she can remember the pains and the dilemmas of a new manager, but also because she has been managing the learning of managers at ABSA and elsewhere, we believe she's going to give us some very useful insights that can help us to move with something tangible. We also have Tony Tugi, who is the Managing Director of North and East Africa SECOM Limited. Welcome, Tony. Welcome, Mumbi. Tony will be bringing some interesting perspectives from the tech world and has a wealth of experience managing particularly the sales and enterprise side of the business. So Tony and sales are hitting rock bottom. We hope that we can also hear how we can manage this kind of difficult situation. And thirdly, we have Lois Wafula, Associate Director at Central Bank of Kenya, and also Director at Center for Corporate Governance. Again, we hope that Lois, you're going to bring to us a mix of private sector and public sector experience. And also because you have been in the NGO world, you're going to help us cement all these discussions as we roll through. And so I begin the webinar, and just before I begin, I want to ask our audience, utilizing the chat function, please tell us what are the 3 top skills or competencies that managers and leaders will require to navigate the new normal. What skills, what competencies do you feel that managers and leaders will require to navigate the new normal? I'll be checking what you're saying, and I will also encourage all of you to do so that we can learn from each other. And I think we shall begin with you, Mumbi, because you have been in the HR function supporting new managers. What insights do you have, particularly around making a leap and a successful transition from individual contributor to becoming an effective manager to becoming an effective leader? And because leadership and management has a lot to do with managing and leading people, you could also tell us how new managers can effectively lead and motivate their teams.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Nice to meet you. It's good to see all of you engaging at this time to actually get yourself to know what it is that you can do as new managers. I have to say, it's been a very long time since I was a new manager. So to Agnes's point, I'm not too sure I can remember some of the stuff and the mistakes I made, but I have the privilege within my organization and within our 10 countries to actually help new managers transition from being individual contributors. So one of my responsibilities is to help people who have been promoted, who used to be individual contributors, who are specialists maybe in a small area, to actually take some management roles in the bank. So I do have an appreciation that the role of transitioning is actually not an easy transitioning. And the point is that usually in our organizations, in the typical organization, somebody is generally promoted to become a manager of people that they've been hanging out with. So I'm promoted amongst my friends. So it's usually the first thing I have to deal with is just how do I manage now that I used to hang out with these people, we used to laugh. We actually used to say not nice things sometimes of my manager, and now I am the manager. So I already am in that space. So the transition for me is before you even start transitioning outside, the transition has to happen inside. So the internal realization and realignment of what it is that is expected of you going forward is something that needs to happen before it is actually being evidenced on the outside. So the thing I tell managers is, one, is management is not an easy task, and nobody gets it right all the time. So I encourage managers, new managers, not to enter into management with trepidation or with fear or feeling intimidated. The fact that your organization has given you a team means that your organization sees some potential and sees that you can actually do some good within the organization. So don't enter into management feeling as though you are not qualified for it. I generally will believe that you were interviewed for the position, you have demonstrated some competencies, and that's why you are given the position. So you have the right, you have to speak to yourself constantly to remind yourself that you have the right to be present in that position. So do not just get into that space and think that you're not the right person. So that's one. So deal with your mental limitations that sometimes inhibit you from showing up as you should. That's the first one. The second one is, I think, find yourself things that can improve on what you need to do. So one of the things I say is every organization is different. So you need to understand what your organization looks like. So if I think about my organization, there's a way we will help a manager to figure out what's a culture. And you already have seen it, especially because you've been promoted. You already see. So if an organization is the one that has put all the power on the manager, then you know that you're entering into a place where people will consider you to have all the answers, which I think is the wrong model of manager today. But the organizations that you find yourself, that once you become manager, you become the know-it-all, which is not the right way. So in my organization, we encourage managers to continue their learning journey. because while you may know a few things, you will not know everything. So it's important for you to always see yourself as somebody on a learning journey, even as you get to management. So transitioning is not something that you will get right the first time. You will have to learn new things. You will have to learn your team. So remember, the relationships that you had with people was more friendship and peer. So once you become a manager, your relationship has got to change. So there is now a vertical relationship between you and your team, while previously it was a lateral relationship. So there has to be a way then you start understanding how it is that each of your members show up every day. So there's a very lovely book that I would want to recommend for every new manager to actually go and find out. The book is called First Break All the Rules. And that book is written by Gallup, and it breaks some myths around what managers are and what they are, and it talks about how you manage using people's strengths. So I encourage managers to spend time to understand their team members, understand who is strong in what area, understand who struggles in what area, so that in the event where you start allocating responsibilities and tasks, you then know who are the people that you can distribute the work within the team. You also then get to know as you talk to them, and the only way you get to understand people is you get to talk to them. So don't sit in an office and luckily for many organizations today, we don't have all these closed offices. We may get there. The conversation right now is maybe open plan doesn't work very well with public health issues. So we are starting to see how do we go back to cubicles. But right now, you don't have to enclose yourself and make yourself unreachable. Go and talk to people, because that's the only way you pick up what are their strengths and what it is that they enjoy doing. So I do recommend that getting to know your strengths makes your work easier as a manager, because then it helps you to determine where is it that you're going to spend time to build what skills, but also how do you proportionately and equitably distribute the work within your team. So I guess that for me is just how do I start transitioning as a manager? So those are some of the tips. I think you asked me the other question, which was how do you motivate people? Let me tell you, motivating human beings and motivating adults is not quite easy. People are motivated by what they find interesting for themselves. So don't be deceived that just because you hold a position of power, then people will be feeling motivated to work for you. It doesn't follow. So spending time with people, which is what I said, makes it very, you make yourself open for people to come and ask you questions. That drives engagement. Involving your team in making decisions. Remember, we said you're not the holder of all the power and the knowledge within your team. So if there are challenges that you're facing in the team, especially around work, let everybody in the team start getting involved in determining how do we resolve some of those. That in itself drives engagement to a very large extent. So those are some of the things that I would highlight.
Thank you very much, Mumbi. Very well covered. Tony, you've been in this game for a long time. Would you like to chip in? How is the transition, and how do we keep the team, in addition to motivated, how do we gain credibility as new managers?
Okay, thank you, Agnes, and fellow panelists and all the participants. Indeed, a golden opportunity for us all to learn from each other. I think my own personal experience is that transitioning from an individual contributor to being a people manager was rather a shock, really, because whereas you had figured out your space in terms of being an individual contributor, you are an expert in your own field, and suddenly you're now supposed to deliver through people. So that's one big shocker. And then you find people with varied emotions, pulling differently. And therefore that in itself becomes a very big shock. So I think it takes a lot of getting used to that new environment. So the first thing I'd like to tell the new managers is that it is okay. Everybody goes through that transition shock. So you need to allow yourself and immerse yourself into that shock. The other thing is that, do not fear to fail, because, as an expert, you're used to getting things right. But now suddenly you're supposed to take certain decisions. And so the fear to make a mistake would probably even begin to hinder you from taking decisions. So failing is part of learning. And I would really encourage you to fail fast and fail forward. In other words, learn from the failures as quickly as possible. There is nobody who will teach you everything about life and how to run a business. So I learned that the hard way that, failure is part of the game and you need to get moving. The other, pointer is just around, which is a bit difficult, is that as a leader or as a manager, sometimes, opening yourselves up for feedback is very, very important, because you need to accept to be criticized. It is not easy to take negative criticisms. The first time I started to open up myself was rather difficult and painful, because you feel naked. But the thing that does to you is that it really strengthens your muscle, and you're able to have a full view of how the business runs. So those are some of the things, just to, as somebody pivots from being an individual contributor. In terms of motivating, I think, as Mumbi said, motivation, the best motivation is intrinsic. It has to come from within you. And so as an individual or as a leader, you need to know what is your purpose in life and what is driving you. Once you capture that, then it will begin to build passion around what you do. I don't believe in external motivation, because it's very short term. I don't think you can satisfy individual needs. So you need to encourage people or your teams to, find purpose and meaning in what they do. If for whatever reason they feel that whatever they are doing is not meaningful, then you need to advise them actually to move and find something else that creates satisfaction, because that's the only way you will have a fully engaged team. And then the other one about motivation is really, one thing about being an individual contributor is that, you're used to doing things yourself. And so the urge to direct the team would come in, because you want to show them what to do. Sometimes, because these are mature people and they're experienced people, if you allow them to be innovative and to be creative around tackling tasks, then, it challenges them and stretches them a bit more. So I think your role as a leader there is simply to sell the vision in terms of where are we heading, and allow them to figure out how to get there. That way, then there is a bit of stretch in that assignment. So you have to find little ways of, keeping them plugged in, keeping them engaged, and keeping them motivated. It's the little things that really count. I have noticed myself that even respect counts a lot. Sometimes, somebody may be too far away in terms of the chain, but they have a contribution to make. If you give them time and listen to them and respect their contribution, then you earn that respect from the team. So, the best respect is really the one that you earn, and not the one that you use your authority to demand from it. So you have to find your own formula. There is no specific, prescription in terms of how you're going to motivate your people, but you have to find a balance and find a connection with your team. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony. Oh, that there's no formula could be heartbreaking. But I'd like to hear from Lois. You're working in the public sector right now. And I know there has been a lot of tension because of government directives, but Lois, what advice would you give us on building our personal resilience, and perhaps also helping the team to build resilience, especially in these tough times? And also some tips on what we can do to build and drive productivity when people are working from home.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So if you allow me, I want to pick on a question first you asked, Tony, on how do you build credibility as a new manager? In government, you can be promoted and you're in charge of people who are your mother's age. I think the assumption that we've made as panelists is that everybody who's in this conversation has been promoted internally. So they've been working with these people, and that may not necessarily be true. You may have gotten into a new organization, you're working with new people who don't know you, who have no exposure in terms of your capability and what you can do. So I think one of the things that you have to do when you're a new manager within an organization or in a new environment is also to show that you understand technically what is happening in that function. The fear that you can be put on charge of people who've been in an organization for a very long time and they're wondering, what do you know? What are you bringing on the table? You are very young, we've been here for 30 years. So how you manage that slippery slope, how you are able to show that you understand the technical aspects of where you've been promoted to, you understand the business, you understand where the business is going, and you're not loading it, as Tony and Mumbi said, over the team that you're in charge for. I think that's very important, because leadership and management is about empowering people and letting them do it and creating a safe environment that they can come and ask you questions, that they can shout if they need help. So I think that's my comment on the issue of credibility and building credibility. And so to the question you asked me two questions. You asked me about resilience. How do we build resilience as people who are going through a very new thing? So being in this, and it's, for me, I'm also learning, I think we haven't experienced COVID-19 in the work environment ever, but I can just share what I have been seeing and what I feel is working. First and foremost is being vulnerable. As leaders, you must be vulnerable. You must be open to your team to say, this is new. We are all going through this thing. We are all learning as we go. So you can't show that you know, because you may not know. Second is communicate. I think what is working on issues of building even resilience and hope among our staff and our team is that when we are open to them and telling them, this is a challenge, this is new, this is what we are experiencing, we have to separate based on demographics going forward, because I can share an example of central bank. We public sector and central bank has an old demographics. People above 50 are many. So what we did is separate. So most of the people who are above 55, they're staying at home. So we are saying, how do we equip them if there are conversations we need to have? How do we ensure that we also even build that capacity? That a person who has never used Zoom, how do you loop them in? And that's where Tony needs to come in, because you can't leave these people who are critical to supporting the economy. And they're old, it means they are more vulnerable. They can't come to the office. How do you leverage that? So for me, that has been very, very interesting. The other thing is listening, empathy, listening, but just not listening with empathy. So I had, for me, I encountered a very interesting happening, because now we were divided. Apart from just when you're older, we divided our teams into shifts. So a team works Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, then goes away. Another team works Thursday and Friday in case of exposure. And that has continued to work very well. And it has ensured that in case someone tests positive or comes into contact with someone, they can be quarantined and work can continue. That has been interesting. But just listening to people who are concerned about what if I get exposed? I have children who are coming in from different countries. I can expose them if I come to the office. Many fears, people who are overwhelmed. You expect them to be productive in their homes. They've never worked in their homes. They've worked in government for 30 years. Now you're telling them to work from their homes. So being empathetic as a manager, I think at this point in time has to be really, really critical, and not working with assumptions. For me, in terms of building resilience, you must stop assuming. There are things that we assume that we can all tweet, we can all chat, we can all do webinars. Not everybody can do that. So how do we build skills, or how do we then work with teams of people who can't do this? And in the same time, how do you look at your teams and say, we are going to bridge this gap in the shortest time possible to be able to make you productive? Okay, so just looking at the variables, because there've been very, very interesting things about empathy, about communicating, about being open, because we are all learning about in these interesting times. And how do we then ensure that if we identify a gap in your team members, and yet you still have to try and be productive, how do you bridge that gap as a manager? And even in yourself, because you may realize you have never used TikTok. I think I hear that's the new thing that people are using, and they're having even online tea. I mean, those are new things that we are experiencing, even us who are not necessarily millennials, and we are not necessarily the baby boomers. We are learning how do we quickly get our teams and ourselves as managers to build that resilience, and to continue being productive for our organizations. And I think the final question you asked was, how do we link productivity and how do we measure that? I think, it's a very, very difficult thing, because I think we are being forced as managers to trust more, to trust our teams more, because now you can't micromanage. There's no walking to this person's desk and saying, where are you? Do you need help? It's about, how do I trust my team that they will be able to deliver and do within the timelines that I have provided. But I think also as a leader or as a manager, you have to be very clear in terms of your expectations. You understand? You have to be very clear, and you have to be able to define the accountabilities that you expect from your team. Because if you tell me I want this report, but you have not defined what parameters of the report that you expect me to deliver, I can give you what I think is a report in time, but it doesn't add value to you. I think these are times that are making managers and leaders be really clear in terms of defining what accountabilities they require, in terms of clearly assigning tasks and responsibilities to their team, in terms of building trust so that the team can chat or WhatsApp or call you to clarify. So building trust, and in terms of also as a manager trusting your teams, because you're not there, you're not able to micromanage. And then how will we measure performance at the end of the season, at the end of a period? Because now organizations are being forced to get out of, we are no longer going to be having, in June, end of June, we are having appraisals, and then December we are having appraisal. So now this has to be continuous. As managers, as leaders, how will you then create environments where you can provide feedback that is continuous, and you can actually revise the performance, appraisal, or how you measure performance within your different spaces as you go. So for me, I think top of mind is build trust, build a culture of trust in your teams. Things have changed. Equip your teams. Don't work on assumptions. Just because you can tweet and you have internet, everybody has internet. How do you facilitate your teams? 3, be very clear in terms of how do you come up with a very clear communication so that people are very clear in terms of the expectations. How do you define accountabilities so that I know what is expected of me, so that at the end of the conversation, I'm not getting surprised or shocked by what you're saying. And ultimately be empathetic as a manager. These are tough times. We have children, we are balancing husbands, we're balancing babies, we're balancing shopping, we're balancing work, we're balancing our fears, we are overwhelmed, we don't know if we'll get corona, so just be empathetic and listen more. Thank you.
Wow, you've just summarized what everyone is struggling with. I could see a lot of smiles on my screen. But I really like, Lois, that you're talking about empathy, and Mumbi talking about believing in yourself, and Tony talking about your own struggles and asking for feedback a lot more, and really getting vulnerable as leaders. I want to flip this question to now look at what lies ahead for us. And of course, a lot of debate around the COVID-19 is about the new normal. Now, it's about also redefining our style and our approach to leading people as leaders. So Tony, I know you're at the apex of the organization. and everyone is kind of looking at you and waiting for directions. But I'd like to hear from you in terms of looking ahead as leaders. What are the things we could really do differently to help us lead the team effectively, but also looking at the different kind of opportunities, perhaps from a technology perspective, being more innovative, being more flexible, but would like to hear from you.
Okay, thank you, Agnes. I think just listening to my colleagues, I'm also learning quite a bit. As we agreed, this is a learning platform for everyone.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that immediately you see here is that we're able to have a conversation with about 90 people. So this is really the new normal. We don't, I mean, people are scattered all over the world, but we're still able to have a conversation. And then thanks to this crisis. So when you think about a crisis, one of the things I like to point out to a leader is that a crisis presents two things. They usually say that, there's always a silver lining or on a cloudy situation. And therefore, it's up to you as a leader to try and see what that silver lining is and be able to take advantage of that. So this is non-business as usual circumstances that we are facing in. Our lives have been disrupted completely. I have personally been spending sleepless nights trying to figure out, how do I pivot the business? Because remember, as a leader, the full responsibility sits with you, because I don't think you'll appear before the board and say, because of COVID-19, I was unable to deliver this. I mean, that is not an expected conversation you'll have with your management or your leadership. So there's heavy expectation and responsibility on the shoulders of a leader. So there are a number of trends that have popped up, and as I said, we can flip that whichever way and see opportunities around it. And as new managers, you need now to look at your environment and try and figure out, where is that silver lining and how do I pivot my business? So first of all, I think a lot of businesses are now struggling with survival. It's all about sustenance. How do we survive the next 3 months? How do we even ensure that we do not shut our doors? If you look at it across different sectors, I think the impact has been varied. Sectors like hospitality, tourism, construction, etc. Some have had to shut down their doors. And then shutting doors really means, a lot of things and a lot of impact to you as a leader. It could mean loss of jobs. It could mean, you're not planning for growth anymore. When we started Q1, we were all bullish and said, at least we've come out of 2019, which was a rather slow year. And everybody was bullish about 2020. And, one quarter down the road, you're faced with a crisis. So what will you do to ensure that you survive? So some of the tactics would probably be around, how do you preserve cash? How do you, defer certain key decisions? So as a leader, it's really about being creative around your environment. Secondly, the new norm of around working remotely, it's even, the folks in the villages now understand what it means. They call you to confirm if you're working from home, because that's what is expected of you. But the real challenge around working from home to you as a leader is, first of all, are you ready and are you prepared to still be able to deliver by having teams working remotely? How prepared were you from our tools, availing the platforms and tools for teams to be able to still discharge their duties? How do you manage productivity of your teams? You don't see them. You're not even sure if they're out of bed. They could be, doing many things, but they are going through different struggles. So remote working has come with its own challenges. The question is, as a leader, how do you still continue to do business? And that goes to the point that Lois talked about in terms of, you have to trust them and you have to define certain outcomes that you expect, because you cannot manage activities anymore. Okay, so if you're the manager that is used to micromanagement, this is probably one of your worst, environments. So you have to learn to start managing outcomes as opposed to, tracking activities. The other piece, of course, is that, as a leader, the safety and health of your people then is very important. So I guess the first reaction as a leader is, are my people safe? Are my customers safe? Are my assets safe? And how do I ensure that this remains the way it is? So your mental well-being and that of your team then becomes very critical. And you have to put all the required protocols in place to ensure that, this is in place. So communication becomes critical. Sometimes when, if in the unfortunate event when, an infection happens within the team, how you handle that situation determines, the level of credibility and emergency management. It's a holistic challenge to you as a leader. So being transparent and communicating, regularly without hiding anything, I guess would help the situation. So in terms of opportunities, just to flip that a bit, and I'll try to look at it across different sectors. Whereas the crisis presents certain challenges like complete shutdown, job losses, or even slow growth, etc., or declining productivity. But there could be leveraging on innovation and technology opportunities for you to flip that around. Somebody said that in this situation there'll be winners and losers. So those who will pivot will likely win. Those who will wait for business as usual to return to normal will probably not have the opportunity to see that return of the business as usual. And an example is local manufacturing. So first of all, they woke up one morning and their entire ecosystem is disrupted. Their supply chain, which is in the, mainly in the Far East or Europe, they had no access to supply of raw materials or even markets. What does that mean? Does that mean that, you rethink about your strategy and say, can I produce locally? People are now beginning, there are many factories that are now able to manufacture masks. They are manufacturing, sanitizers, etc. And this is a new normal for manufacturing industry. So that is an example of a pivot in an industry like that. So you need to look at your environment and figure out what is the best way to navigate and be able to move to the next level. ICT and technology is going to drive your business, okay? If you're in finance and Mumbi, I think, delivering services on digital platforms and fintech is the way to go. So are you ready for that? Do you have the skill set? One of the biggest challenges is, are your people well equipped with the skills to be able to navigate using the new platforms that you require to deliver services to your customers? If you think about education, our children are at home, but you start hearing e-learning. So what does that mean to you? How prepared are you in being in that sector to be able to take advantage of still being able to deliver education through the different channels? Of course, the biggest challenge is that, accessibility to some of these services is still a problem. Penetration of internet is still at about 40% in Africa, which is a big challenge. I saw the minister say only 30% of students have access to, some form of learning, continuous learning. So that is a challenge, but it doesn't mean that you sit back and resign to fate, but you can pivot around there. And I can go on and on in the different sectors. So I think the message is to you as a leader, you need to assess your environment and begin to see what is the best way for you to navigate the new space and take advantage of the different opportunities that presents itself even in these circumstances. So there will be winners and they will win big. A lot of great inventions have happened during a crisis. So, your real creativity and innovation then is, called to test. So that remains a leadership responsibility, and where you take your business next will be determined by, the decisions that you take next. So I think I see lots of opportunities and, that new managers and new leaders can leverage on, and then can steer the team and, communicate the new vision and the new direction that the business is taking. So it's not all gloom. Let's remain positive, but let's pick lessons out of this crisis.
Well, thank you very much, Tony. Very useful insights. There will be winners, there will be losers. And I want to get to the Q&A section. We had received one or two questions. So I will begin with one of the questions that has kind of kept popping, from the questions that the audience asked before they got on board to the questions I have seen on the chat. There is this question that is keeping on popping around managing people remotely? And there's an addition, 2 questions from Anne and Anne. How do we manage remotely? Plus, how do we balance between work, life, and many other elements? How do we manage and build the team in a way that they are not going to be exposed to burnout? So Mumbi, I would like you to tackle that question. Plus, how do we draw the line when you're working from home? What are the hours? What are the rules of the game? You know, balancing between what Lois talked about and Tony, between being a homeschooler, being a manager, being yourself, and many other things. Mumbi, if you could tackle that.
I get asked this question so often because we are having to address things that we haven't had to do. So essentially before March, managers managed by observation. There's this management methodology we call managing by walking about mbwa. So a lot of us were very used to mbwa. So you would walk up in your office to just make sure that everybody is busy. And once the manager is coming around, maybe people will look down to their computers and seem as though they're very, very busy. Now, we did a survey in our office. One of the biggest things that has come through is micromanagement. So the worst thing that is happening right now with managers is that they have tuned to micromanagement. And micromanagement, which speaks to what I think Tony and Lois spoke earlier on, has everything to do with the lack of trust. So the fact that we are not building trust, and it comes from where we were. I don't think we build trust with our teams because it was not necessary effectively. As long as I'm around and my people are around, I will get them to do the work. But now you're not around, you cannot observe their performance. You have got to trust them. So the question of how do I manage remotely? Number one, I guess, and I have to say it again, you must build the hard currency of trust. So trust is not a soft thing. Trust is the hard currency for working remotely, because you have to trust that your people are going to actually do the work they're supposed to do. And it speaks to productivity. The saddest thing is the research that came from the United States says that in the Western world, or the developed countries, productivity has dropped by 85% since people started working remotely. That's bad for any economy. So to imagine that over 80% of the employees are working remotely, but the productivity has dropped by 85%, that's a disaster for any economy. So as managers, and managers are the ones who are held responsible for executing the strategy. So that's one of the differences between leaders and managers. Leaders give us the strategy and the vision. The managers have the responsibility of executing that strategy. So the manager's responsibility is to make sure that they get the work done through people. So one of the things that we are training our managers to do is to chunk out bits of tasks on a weekly basis. So at the beginning of every week, you have to meet collectively as a team, but you also have, as a manager, to call each of your people one-on-one so that you can agree for this week, what is it that we are going to achieve? So number one is chunking out the tasks, chunking out the outcomes you expect. I talk about outcomes, I don't talk about activities, because productivity now has got to be determined by outcomes, not by the activities that people do. So it's not how many calls I make, it is what is it that I get out of those calls. So we have to distinguish between activities and outcomes. So as a manager, for you to manage remotely, be clear on what outcome do you want to see at the end of the week? What outcome do I want to see at the end of the month? Then chunk that out for your team. So that's number one. Number two is build the connection. The fact that we are not seeing each other on an ongoing basis means that we have to become more human, which I think is what Lois was talking about, empathy. Become more human by connecting with your people on a regular basis. Lois talked about the juggling. I have to be a homeschooling parent. I have to be a manager. I have to be a husband. I have to be a wife. I have to be a child as well, because some of us are also having to manage our parents remotely. because we were used to driving there every so often. Now it's not happening. So we also have people within our families who have also probably lost jobs, and we have to manage those relations. So the humanity component, which builds connection between human beings, is one that managers must learn how to. That is a key component of managing remotely. What I tell people is, for a manager as yourself, carve out time when you build some, what we used to call them ground rules with your team. What are the good hours that your team members should be talking to you, or you should be talking to them? So let me give you an example. We are used to having morning huddles. So, and maybe Tony knows about those huddles from a sales perspective. So you have a morning huddle every morning, maybe at 8 o'clock. But I have two children. One is 10, the other one is 12. Their class starts at 8. So if you start telling me that I'm going to have a morning huddle at 8 and I'm homeschooling, that doesn't work. So let's have some ground rules in terms of what are the appropriate times that we can talk, and lock those times. That's number one. Number two, what are the blackout hours? You have to agree, you have to contract with people. And that's why I say trust is a big thing. Contract with your teams on blackout hours. Blackout hours are, if I have a toddler and the toddler has got to be fed at 12:30 to 1:30, then you can't start saying that that's when we will have a midday sales call to know how well have you done. So those ground rules help in managing remotely. So it's agreeing on what are the things that we can and how is it that we want to manage as a team. And those are things that you involve your team to come up with, because they will help you in managing and driving a collaborative team throughout that period. You asked me, how do I balance? I think balancing is a very tricky part right now, because I don't call it balance. You can't balance. I think we need to start saying, how do I integrate? So somebody asked me the other day and said, am I working from home, or am I living at work? What's the one? Because I think the lines are so blurred, you can't tell whether you are working from home or you are living at work. So the fact that you're a manager does not give you the right to call me at 8 p.m. or to call me at all the hours. So then I get the sense that I am living at work and not working from home. So it's no longer balancing, it is integrating. So how do I integrate these hours between some people in my team would rather wake up early? So we have people who are waking up to start work at 6 because they have to knock off at 9. So we have meetings that are happening at 7 to 8 because it is possible for all of us to actually do that. There are other teams who are meeting between 6 and 7 p.m. or 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. That's integration. We are agreeing as a team. We are balancing all the things. And it's important for us to know that we are all at different phases of life. They are much older, like Lois was saying. The 55-year-old probably doesn't have an issue with working throughout maybe the whole morning. But that's not true for a 35-year-old mother or father who has got to do homeschooling. So let's integrate our work with our lifestyles and our home life, because that's what it is. So it's not balance for me, it is more an integration story. And one of the things I tell managers is help your teams to do something we are encouraging our managers to do at home. To set boundaries, especially with your children, if you have small children. So try and see whether you can discuss with your children some boundaries, that when mommy or daddy sits on that chair, even if it's at the dining table, because some of us are going to the dining table, some of us are using our bedrooms to actually do that. When mommy locks that door, or when daddy locks that door, that's a boundary to say, mommy and daddy probably have got a call, and therefore you are not to interrupt me unless it's an emergency. It is working and helping people as you go along. Teaching is one thing, but the more you experience these things, the more you learn that there are things that we can all be good at. So setting boundaries at home is very good for remote working, because then people can just know these hours are blocked and these spaces are sacred, if I may use that, especially for the children.
Thank you very much, Mumbi. I see we have our last 5 minutes, so I will ask our panelists to give us our final parting shot. Just a one-liner to encourage the new managers, but there's one interesting question that has kept popping for Tony. What are the available online tools to enable collaboration? And also, if you could combine that with an additional question on cybersecurity and how we manage client information and confidentiality while we are working from home. Very briefly, Tony, you go first with your final parting shot.
That sounds like a highly tech person, so I'm sure. Yeah, but just in a nutshell, I think we have a number of tools available. And then a lot more accessible now. I think a lot of ICT companies, as I talked about pivoting, I think there's a boom almost in the tech sector. So there are many solutions. Companies like Microsoft and many others that are providing a lot of these collaboration tools like Zoom, Teams, etc. I think it's a myriad of them. And the beauty is that also all the service providers are really coming into play to say they like to support business continuity from home. So you find that you definitely need connectivity. In whichever collaboration tool will require some form of connectivity. And so you realize a lot of telecommunication companies have come in to make it a lot more affordable for people to log in and be able to continue their communication. So I think there are as many as possible. Go online and just check, and you'll get access to this. Now, the question of cybersecurity, I think, is one interesting one, both as a threat and as an opportunity, as I said once again. A threat because right now a lot of the tools that we use are not secured because they are connecting to different platforms. And as a business, if you do not have adequate, you've not built adequate security firewalls or security protocols to be able to filter the different threats, then you will be susceptible to those threats. The industry that is called hacking is now very active because there are people who survive on trying to fish information from different businesses. So this is a reality and a big threat. And then so I'd also like to just encourage you that as much as businesses can come up with the different security platforms, but it is your individual responsibility to ensure that you limit yourself in terms of the different sites that you go to. Some of them are not as genuine, and therefore you may be exposing yourself to security threats. I know there is a law that has made it a crime if data, for example, if you misuse data as a service provider. So whereas there is some protection at that level, but the individual responsibility remains paramount for you to ensure that you keep your data as secure as possible. So solutions are available. Go online. I'm available for further consulting. If you need to catch up with me, we can engage remotely. But my parting shot would be, let's identify the silver lining in this crisis. Your business can pivot during this moment. It is not all gloom because in every situation, there's always something that is positive. Technology probably would be one of your silver bullets. If you think about it, if you look at your customer, look at the journey that their customer, you interact with your customer, then probably you'll find something that you can do differently, leveraging on technology and innovation. It is difficult for everybody. You're not alone as a new manager. We are all spending sleepless nights trying to figure out how to survive. And therefore, I'd like to encourage you that, it is the resilience that will see you emerge even stronger out of this crisis. I'm all confident that, in a few months, we'll be looking back and laughing about it and saying, this is what came out of this situation. So all the best, even as you navigate in your new challenge as a manager.
Well, thank you very much, Tony. The silver lining is something we have to identify it and follow it. It's not all gloom. Thank you very much, Tony. Lois, your final parting shot.
I think my final parting shot is as new managers, there's the there's the tension between short-term and long-term, and you can't sacrifice for short-term rather than the long-term. You must be able to balance that, and you must be able, as you look at your people, communicate, be clear, be continuous, and be consistent, and do it with empathy. Because these are all difficult times, but as Tony has said, we're going to come out better people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've picked out 3 C's: communicate, be continuous, be consistent. That's a strategy speaking. And I think Mumbi used the word integrate. So balancing between short-term and long-term requires an integration. Thank you very much, Lois. Mumbi, our final panelist, your parting shot.
My parting shot is well done to being a manager. I think it's a great achievement for you to be where you are at. Believe in yourself. You can actually do this. Every one of us who is managing has had to learn through it. So commit yourself to a learning journey, and that is your self-learning journey. So do not think that you have learned everything. You have so much to learn. So commit yourself to a learning journey. Participation breeds engagement. I want you to always remember that if you have to work through people, which is what managers do, you have to allow for your people to participate in creating things, in making decisions, and in that way they feel engaged, and therefore they give you what we call discretionary effort. Finally, trust is hard currency today. Trust is one of the things that you will need to breed within your teams for you to become successful. Allow your people to actually be autonomous on the tasks that you have given them, and you'll find that you will have much easier time with your teams as you go on. So all the best. You can navigate this storm. It is not too difficult. You will, and we all are learning on this journey. So all the best.
Thank you very much, Mumbi. Trust, the hard-earned currency. You have to earn it. And participation, which breeds engagement. Thank you very much to our panelists. We are getting to the tail end of this session. In just about 3 minutes, we'll be done. And I would like to invite our attendees to really tell us the one thing that you took away from our conversation in this webinar. And also on the chat, Clive Asande, my colleague, has put up his contact details. He is in charge of the New Managers Program, and he says, if you would like to hear more from us, especially on webinars around new managers and also on the program, please pick out his detail and reach out to him, get connected and get moving. I am very excited to see 83 of us here learning about how we can be better managers and great leaders. So one of the things I have done in the last decade is running the New Managers Program. And when we began, we had probably about 10 managers. That really tells you how difficult it was to convince managers to get onto a class to learn about how to settle in. But today, as we speak, in 2019 alone, we trained nearly 500 managers across the region. So this year we have done something even more exciting and interesting. We have redesigned the program to allow for online learning to take place without having the face-to-face interactions. So our New Managers Program is going to run over a period of 3 weeks in July. And we're going to start with a week of virtual self-paced work. And we get you together in a classroom for 3 hours each day for 2 weeks, so that you can engage with facilitators and experts and guest speakers like we have had today. So I want to encourage you to stay in touch with Clive so that you don't miss any of these editions. And I really, really want to thank you all for being part of the webinar. It's been great. To all those who are dialing in from Kenya, I've seen quite a bunch of you dialing from outside of Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda. Just as we were getting on, I saw one of our professors from Harvard mostly joining in. So it's really a great audience that is in here and would like to stay in touch with you. So thank you all. Thank you to our panelists. We hope that you will stay tuned to share the insights that we didn't manage to capture in this 1 hour, both in our other platforms, and also let's continue engaging on LinkedIn and other social media platforms. So thank you very much. Caroline tells me that we have an upcoming webinar for those in the healthcare sector on the 26th of May. I think that's the next one. This is the 11th episode, and we are really hoping to continue partnering with you people so that we can walk through this journey together. So we are here to support you, but also we are here to exchange knowledge. So stay tuned. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. To our panelists, have a great afternoon. Bye-bye. We can use the reaction the reaction button just to say, how did it feel for you to be on this webinar as we log off and continue engaging? Thank you.